Amira's talent blossomed, and by the time she was a teenager, she was competing in and winning regional music competitions. Her playing wasn't just technically flawless, it was emotional, raw, and profoundly moving. By the age of 18, she had earned a scholarship to one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country. It was there that her life changed forever. Amira's childhood had been a symphony of struggle and beauty. Born to immigrant parents in a modest neighborhood, she discovered her passion for music at an early age when her father brought home a second-hand violin from a pawn shop. She was only 6, but the moment her fingers touched the instrument, it was as though the world had opened up to her. Her parents, though struggling financially, did everything they could to nurture her talent. Her mother took on extra shifts as a seamstress, and her father worked long hours at a factory to pay for her lessons. Leo entered her world like a gust of wind, unpredictable and impossible to ignore. He was a guest conductor for an orchestral competition in which Amira was performing. While most judges were stiff and formal, Leo was magnetic, his passion for music infectious. Amira noticed him immediately, not just because of his charisma, but because of the way he watched her play. Unlike the other judges, who scribbled notes on their score sheets, Leo sat back and listened, his eyes closed as if drinking in every note she played. After her performance, he found her backstage. "You don't just play the violin," he said. "You make it speak." Their relationship blossomed quickly. Leo was older by 10 years, but his charm and encouragement drew Amira in. He made her feel seen, special, and irreplaceable. When their relationship turned romantic, it seemed inevitable. "Together, we'll create something beautiful," he often told her, and for a while they did. Amira began traveling with him as he rose in the ranks of the classical music world, from a guest conductor to the chief conductor of a prestigious orchestra. But as Leo's career soared, Amira's began to stall. She had dreams of performing on international stages and composing her own symphonies. But Leo's ambition often took precedence. He needed her support, her presence at events, her understanding during long rehearsals, and her ability to make a home for them wherever his career led. She let her own dreams slip away, convincing herself that supporting Leo was enough. Yet, in the quiet moments when she played her violin alone, she couldn't ignore the ache in her chest. Music was her soul, and though she loved Leo, she couldn't help but feel as if she had lost a part of herself in his shadow. Leo had always been a man of ambition. Born into a wealthy family, he had grown up surrounded by privilege, but he was determined to carve out a name for himself that wasn't tied to his parents' money. Music had been his escape from the expectations of his upbringing. While his father wanted him to join the family business, Leo found solace in the piano and later in conducting. He loved the power of standing before an orchestra, the way a flick of his hand could bring dozens of musicians into perfect harmony. It wasn't just music to him, it was control, precision, and artistry all rolled into one. By the time he met Amira, Leo was already making waves in the classical music world. He was known not just for his talent but for his charm and charisma. He had a way of drawing people in, making them feel like they were the only person in the room. It was a skill that served him well, both in his career and in his personal life. When he met Amira, he was struck by her raw talent and the way she poured her soul into her music. She reminded him of himself in his early years, hungry, passionate, and willing to do whatever it took to succeed. But beyond her talent, there was something about Amira that softened Leo. She wasn't like the polished, ambitious women he had dated in the past. She was genuine, vulnerable, and deeply kind. She grounded him in a way he hadn't realized he needed. At first, their relationship felt like a partnership. Amira's presence at his side gave him a sense of stability, and he loved the way she admired him. But as his career grew, so did his ego. The more recognition he received, the more he began to see himself as the star of their relationship. He didn't mean to overshadow Amira, but his ambition was all-consuming. He wanted to be the best, to lead the most prestigious orchestras, to leave a legacy in the world of classical music. And he assumed Amira would be by his side, supporting him, as she always had. What Leo didn't realize, or perhaps refused to acknowledge, was that his success came at a cost. Amira's dreams had begun to fade, and though she never said it outright, he could sense her growing discontent. But Leo wasn't the kind of man to stop and reflect. He was always moving forward, always chasing the next goal. And in his mind, Amira was just as much a part of his success as his talent. He didn't see the cracks forming in their relationship, the small moments of tension and silence that hinted at deeper issues. He was too focused on his career, too caught up in the adoration of the audiences and the praise of critics. And then, Eleanor entered the picture. Eleanor Dupree had always been a force to be reckoned with. From the moment she stepped into the world of classical music, she commanded attention. Born into a family of art collectors, Eleanor had grown up surrounded by culture and sophistication. Her parents had instilled in her a deep love for the arts, but also an unrelenting drive to succeed. She had inherited their ruthlessness and sharpened it into a weapon, using her charm and intellect to climb the ranks of the Philharmonic Society. By the time she became the chairwoman of the society, Eleanor had cultivated an image of perfection. She was poised, elegant, and always in control. But beneath her polished exterior, she was a woman who thrived on power. She loved the feeling of influencing decisions, shaping careers, and holding sway over some of the most talented musicians in the world. When she first met Leo, she was immediately intrigued. Here was a man who matched her ambition, a conductor who wasn't just talented but also charismatic and bold. Eleanor prided herself on recognizing potential, and she saw in Leo someone who could elevate the Philharmonic to new heights. She took him under her wing, championing him for the position of chief conductor. At first, their relationship was strictly professional. Eleanor admired Leo's drive and dedication, and she enjoyed mentoring him. But as they worked more closely together, the lines between professional and personal began to blur. Eleanor wasn't used to being challenged, but Leo had a way of keeping up with her, of meeting her gaze with the same intensity she projected. It was intoxicating. Eleanor knew from the beginning that Leo was married, but that didn't deter her. In her mind, Amira was irrelevant, a quiet, unassuming woman who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of Leo's ambition. Eleanor convinced herself that she and Leo were a better match, two people cut from the same cloth. She didn't set out to seduce him, but she also didn't stop herself when their conversations became more intimate. She knew the risks, but the thrill of the affair was too enticing to resist. For Eleanor, it wasn't just about Leo, it was about power, control, and the satisfaction of knowing she could have whatever she wanted. And what she wanted was Leo. The Philharmonic Society's annual gala was always the highlight of the year, a glamorous evening celebrating the orchestra and its achievements. This year it was particularly special, as Leo was being honored for his contributions as chief conductor. The announcement had been made weeks ago, and Amira had been hesitant to attend. She knew what these events were like. Ritzy affairs filled with patrons, board members, and critics, all dressed in their finest clothes, sipping champagne and exchanging thinly veiled gossip. And while Leo thrived in these spaces, Amira always felt out of place. Amira spent hours preparing for the evening. She chose a sleek black dress and pinned her hair into an elegant updo. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. She stared into the mirror, her confidence faltering. She wasn't the same young, vibrant violinist Leo had fallen in love with. She felt older, more tired, and more like a shadow of herself. Still, she forced a smile and told herself she was doing this for Leo. It was his night, after all. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light, and a string quartet played softly in the background. Amira stayed close to Leo as they entered, her arm looped through his, but it wasn't long before he was swept away by admirers. She watched as he worked the room, his smile charming, his laughter easy. He was in his element. Amira found herself standing alone, nursing a glass of champagne as she scanned the crowd. That's when Eleanor approached her, gliding across the room like a queen surveying her kingdom. "Amira," she said warmly, her voice smooth as silk. "You look stunning tonight." Amira forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Eleanor. It's a beautiful event." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with something that felt almost predatory. "Leo's done such incredible work this year. You must be so proud of him." "I am," Amira replied, though the words felt hollow. She hated how Eleanor always managed to make her feel small, as though she were just an accessory to Leo's success. Eleanor sipped her champagne, her gaze flicking briefly to where Leo stood, surrounded by admirers. "He's quite the talent," she said, her tone casual but pointed. "It's no wonder everyone wants a piece of him." Amira felt a flicker of irritation but swallowed it down. She didn't want to cause a scene. "Yes, he's worked hard for this," she said simply. As the evening wore on, Amira found herself growing more and more uncomfortable. She couldn't help but notice the way Eleanor's hand lingered on Leo's arm during conversations, the way her laughter seemed louder when he was near. And then there was the way Leo didn't seem to mind. If anything, he seemed to enjoy Eleanor's attention, leaning into her presence with an ease that made Amira's stomach churn. By the end of the night, Amira was ready to leave. On the car ride home, she finally voiced her frustration. "You seemed awfully close to Eleanor tonight," she said, her tone sharper than she intended. Leo frowned, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "She's the chairwoman of the Philharmonic Society, Amira. I have to maintain a good relationship with her." "There's maintaining a relationship, and then there's whatever that was," Amira shot back. Leo sighed, his voice laced with exasperation. "You're imagining things. Eleanor is a colleague, nothing more." But Amira couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She stared out the window, the city lights blurring as tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. For the first time, she wondered if she truly knew the man sitting beside her. The days following the gala were tense. Leo was distant, throwing himself into his work, while Amira tried to push down the gnawing doubts that had taken root in her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the growing unease. Something about Eleanor's behavior and Leo's reaction to it didn't sit right with her. One afternoon, while tidying up Leo's study, Amira stumbled across something that made her heart stop. It was a handwritten note, tucked carelessly between the pages of a music score. The note was brief but intimate, written in elegant, looping handwriting. "Looking forward to our next meeting. Last night was unforgettable. E." Amira stared at the note, her hands trembling. She read it again and again, hoping she'd misunderstood, but the meaning was clear. Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments of doubt she had been trying to ignore. Eleanor's lingering touches, the way Leo had brushed off her concerns, his late nights at the Philharmonic, it all added up to something she didn't want to believe. When Leo came home that evening, she confronted him. She held up the note, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "What is this, Leo?" Leo's face paled, but he quickly composed himself. "It's nothing." Eleanor has a dramatic way of expressing herself. "It's harmless." "Harmless?" Amira snapped. "This doesn't look harmless to me, Leo. Are you having an affair?" Leo's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked as though he might deny it. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Eleanor and we've worked closely together. She's always been a little affectionate. But it's nothing serious." Amira felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. "Do you hear yourself? You're defending her." "I'm not defending her," Leo said, his voice rising. "I'm saying you're overreacting. Eleanor means nothing to me, Amira. You're my wife." But the words rang hollow. Amira turned away, unable to look at him. She didn't know what hurt more, the possibility that Leo had betrayed her, or the fact that he refused to take responsibility for it. Eleanor Dupree prided herself on her ability to read people. She knew how to find their weaknesses, their desires, and their fears, and she knew how to use that knowledge to her advantage. With Leo, it had been easy. He was ambitious, talented, and deeply insecure beneath his polished exterior. Eleanor had seen it the moment she met him, and she had known exactly how to reel him in. It had started innocently enough. She had taken him under her wing, mentoring him and championing his career. But as they spent more time together, Eleanor found herself drawn to him. He was younger, passionate, and eager to please, a perfect distraction from the loneliness that had crept into her life. Eleanor didn't care about Amira. To her, Amira was an obstacle, a woman who didn't understand the man she had married. Leo needed someone who could match his ambition, someone who could push him to greatness. And Eleanor was convinced that she was that person. But Eleanor wasn't foolish. She knew the risks of their relationship, and she knew how to play her cards carefully. She had built her career on her reputation, and she wouldn't let a scandal ruin her. Still, she couldn't resist the thrill of the affair, the way it made her feel powerful and alive. She told herself that she was in control, that she could end things with Leo whenever she wanted. But deep down, Eleanor knew the truth. She didn't just want Leo. She wanted to win. And to her, winning meant taking everything Amira had and making it hers. Amira barely slept the night after confronting Leo. The note from Eleanor, Leo's vague excuses, and his refusal to fully admit the truth weighed on her like a crushing weight. She felt like her life, once a carefully composed melody, had descended into chaos. Sitting alone in the early hours of the morning, her violin propped against the corner of the room, she wondered how she had ended up here. How had the man who once adored her become so distant, so unrecognizable? Leo, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing had happened. He left that morning for the Philharmonic, kissing her cheek lightly before heading out the door. The gesture, which once brought her comfort, now felt hollow, as if he were trying to paper over the cracks in their relationship. Amira spent the day replaying everything in her mind. The gala, Eleanor's lingering touches, the note, Leo's dismissive explanations, it all pointed to something she didn't want to face. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him, but deep down she knew there was more to the story. By evening, she decided she couldn't sit in silence any longer. She needed answers. She needed to hear the truth, not from Leo, but from Eleanor. Amira found herself dialing Eleanor's number, her hands trembling as she held the phone. When Eleanor answered, her voice was as smooth and polished as ever. "Amira, what a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Amira's voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "We need to talk, in person." There was a pause on the other end, and then Eleanor replied, "Of course. How about lunch tomorrow? There's a lovely cafe near the Philharmonic." "My treat." The calmness in Eleanor's voice only fueled Amira's anger. She agreed to the meeting, determined to confront the woman who had inserted herself into her marriage. The next day, Amira arrived at the cafe early, her stomach churning with nerves. Eleanor swept in a few minutes later, dressed impeccably as always. She greeted Amira with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and slid into the seat across from her. "So," Eleanor began, folding her hands neatly on the table, "what's on your mind?" Amira didn't bother with pleasantries. "I found your note to Leo." Eleanor's expression didn't waver, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, amusement, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Ah," she said lightly, as if they were discussing the weather. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." The casualness of her response sent a jolt of anger through Amira. "What exactly do you want from my husband?" Eleanor tilted her head, her smile sharp. "Leo is a brilliant man, Amira. He has the kind of talent that could take him to the top, but he needs someone who understands him, someone who can push him to be even greater. And you think that's you?" Amira shot back. Eleanor's smile widened. "I know it is. You're a sweet girl, Amira, but you and I both know you can't keep up with him. Leo needs someone who's his equal, someone who sees the world the way he does." Amira's hands clenched into fists under the table. "You don't know anything about our marriage." "Oh, but I do," Eleanor said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I see the way he looks at me, the way he lights up when we're together. Face it, Amira, you're holding him back." Amira stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was low but firm. "You can have your fantasies, Eleanor, but I won't let you destroy my marriage." Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply sipped her coffee and said with a chilling calmness, We'll see. Leo sat down heavily on the couch, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he didn't speak, and Amira felt her heart pounding in her chest as she waited. Finally, he looked up at her, his expression conflicted. I didn't mean for it to happen, he admitted quietly. Eleanor and I, it started as nothing. Just conversations, late nights at the Philharmonic. She understood the pressure I was under, and she made me feel valued. Amira felt the weight of his words, her chest tightening. You had an affair, she said, her voice trembling. Leo shook his head. It wasn't like that. It didn't go that far. I never slept with her, Amira, I swear, but I let it get too close. I let her think there was something between us. Amira's eyes filled with tears. And what about me, Leo? Did you ever think about me while you were letting her into our lives? I was stupid, he said, his voice breaking. I got caught up in my own ambition, in the attention she gave me. But I never stopped loving you, Amira. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fix this. I want us to work. But Amira wasn't sure if love was enough anymore. The man sitting before her felt like a stranger, and she didn't know if she could trust him again. Amira returned home from her confrontation with Eleanor feeling emotionally raw and exhausted. For the first time in years, she felt like she had truly stood up for herself, but the encounter had left her shaken. Eleanor's words echoed in her mind, her confidence and smugness gnawing at Amira's resolve. When Leo arrived home later that evening, Amira was waiting for him in the living room. She didn't want to wait any longer. She needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Leo, she began, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. We need to talk. Leo paused in the doorway, his expression wary. Amira, I've had a long day. I don't care, she interrupted. I talked to Eleanor. His face paled slightly, but he quickly masked it with a neutral expression. What did she say? She said you and I are holding each other back, Amira replied, her tone sharp. She thinks she knows you better than I do, better than I ever could. So tell me, Leo, what's the truth? Are you having an affair with her? Eleanor wasn't one to accept defeat. When Amira confronted her at the cafe, Eleanor had been momentarily taken aback by the woman's fire. She had underestimated her. But Eleanor wasn't worried. She knew Leo better than Amira did, at least. That's what she told herself. She had invested too much in Leo to let him go now. Their connection wasn't just personal, it was strategic. With Leo by her side, she could solidify her influence in the Philharmonic, ensuring that no one could challenge her authority. And if Amira thought she could stand in the way of that, she was sorely mistaken. Eleanor decided to escalate her efforts. She began planting seeds of doubt in Leo's mind, subtly undermining his confidence in Amira. During rehearsals, she would drop casual comments about how stressful his home life must be, how difficult it must be to balance his work and his marriage. You deserve someone who understands you, Leo, she said one evening after rehearsal, her voice soft and persuasive. Someone who truly appreciates your genius. Leo didn't respond, but Eleanor saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. She knew she was getting to him, and she relished the power she held. But what Eleanor didn't anticipate was Amira's quiet strength. While Eleanor was scheming, Amira was finding her voice, rediscovering the passion and resilience she had buried for so long. And though Eleanor thought she was untouchable, she was about to learn that even the most carefully constructed plans could unravel. The tension in the Lockwood household had reached a breaking point. Days had passed since Leo's confession, and Amira found herself teetering on the edge of a decision that would change her life forever. She had spent hours locked in her music room, pouring her emotions into her violin, attempting to make sense of the chaos that had consumed her marriage. The haunting, mournful notes she played echoed through the house, a reflection of her heartbreak, but also of her growing clarity. Leo, on the other hand, was unraveling. He could feel Amira slipping away from him, and he didn't know how to stop it. He had avoided Eleanor at work, cutting short their conversations and brushing off her advances. But the damage was already done. Eleanor wasn't one to let go quietly, and Leo knew she wouldn't back down without a fight. He felt trapped, his personal and professional lives colliding in a way that threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. Amira, however, had made a decision. She realized that waiting for Leo to fix things, to prove himself, was futile. She had spent too long living in his shadow, sacrificing her own dreams and identity for the sake of their marriage. She loved Leo, but love alone couldn't repair the cracks in their foundation. She needed to take her life back, to reclaim the part of herself she had lost. It was with this resolve that Amira decided to attend the Philharmonic's next performance. She hadn't been to one of Leo's concerts in months, but this time she wasn't there to support him. She was there to confront Eleanor one last time. The concert hall was as grand as ever, filled with the city's elite. Amira sat in the audience, her nerves buzzing as she waited for the performance to begin. She spotted Eleanor in the front row, her posture as poised and confident as ever. The woman looked untouchable, but Amira knew better. Eleanor's power came from manipulation and control, and Amira was determined to take that away from her. When the performance ended and the applause filled the hall, Amira made her move. She followed Eleanor backstage, her heart pounding as she rehearsed what she wanted to say. Eleanor turned to face her as she approached, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Amira," she said smoothly, "I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight." Amira met her gaze, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to fight for Leo. You can have him if that's what he wants, but I won't let you destroy me in the process." Eleanor's smirk faltered, her confidence wavering for the first time. "Destroy you? Amira, I don't know what you're talking about." "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Amira said, her tone cutting. "You've built your life around control, around making people feel small so you can feel powerful. But you don't scare me anymore. I've spent too long living in fear of losing Leo, of not being enough. But I've realized something. I don't need him. And I certainly don't need to fear you." Eleanor's expression hardened, but she said nothing. For the first time, Amira saw the cracks in her polished exterior, the vulnerability she worked so hard to hide. It was a small victory, but it was enough. Amira walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone backstage. She didn't need to stay and see what happened next. Her fight wasn't with Eleanor or even with Leo anymore. It was with herself, and she had finally won. That night, Amira returned home and packed her belongings. She left a note for Leo on the kitchen counter, simple and to the point. "I deserve more." She didn't wait for his reaction. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, she felt free. In the months that followed, Amira began rebuilding her life. She returned to performing, her music more powerful and poignant than ever. Critics raved about the depth of emotion in her playing, but only Amira knew the truth. Her music was her story, her pain, and her triumph. As for Leo, he continued his career, but it was never the same. Without Amira, the heart of his music seemed to fade. He and Eleanor's connection fizzled out quickly. What had once been thrilling and forbidden lost its appeal when faced with the weight of reality. Eleanor moved on to her next project, her next conquest, leaving Leo to grapple with the consequences of his choices. Amira, however, thrived. She had found herself again, not as Leo's wife or Eleanor's rival, but as the woman she was always meant to be. Her symphony was no longer about loss or betrayal. It was about strength, resilience, and the beauty of starting over. And this time, the melody was entirely her own.